The autumn air bit at Sarah's fingertips as she stood on the platform in Stowe, Vermont, clutching a train ticket and a paper cup of coffee gone cold. The trees across the tracks blazed with crimson and gold, a vibrant canvas she'd pictured when she first dreamed up this trip, a meticulously planned 40th anniversary gift for her parents. David and Linda. Months of her life had gone into it. Scenic rail passes through New England's fall foliage. A 2-night stay at a historic inn with vineyard views. A private dinner at the same restaurant her parents had dined at during their honeymoon. And a bouquet of asters and goldenrod to grace the table. The cost? Just shy of $9. Carved from her savings as a systems analyst and squeezed between grueling work deadlines. But Sarah didn't care about the money. This was her chance to give her parents something unforgettable. To show them she was more than just the reliable daughter who fixed everything. She handed her ticket to the agent. A grizzled man with a weathered cap. He scanned it, his brow creasing. "This ticket's already been checked," he said, his voice flat but firm. Sarah blinked, the words not quite sinking in. "I'm sorry, what?" He turned the scanner toward her. As if the blinking code would explain it all. "Checked this morning. Passengers already on board." "That's impossible," Sarah said. But the words felt hollow as a knot tightened in her gut. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A text from her younger brother. "Jake, Megan really wanted to see the fall colors. You're not big on crowds anyway. We thought this made sense." Sarah stared at the screen, her breath catching as the train's whistle pierced the morning air. The cars began to move, pulling away from the platform, carrying her parents, Jake, and Megan, her brother's girlfriend of 6 months. Who once borrowed Sarah's scarf to film a viral Instagram reel without asking. They'd taken her seat, her trip, her gift. No warning, no apology, just gone. Sarah stood frozen, the coffee cup trembling in her hand, as the train vanished around a bend, leaving her alone in the crisp Vermont morning. Sarah had always been the family's rock. At 16, when her father lost his job at the auto plant, she'd taken shifts at a local diner, handing every paycheck to her mom without a second thought. Linda called her, "my steady girl," and Sarah wore the title proudly, like a badge of honor. Meanwhile, Jake, the baby of the family, coasted on charm and excuses. He'd crashed crashed the family car twice before he was 20, never paying a dime for repairs. When he barely passed high school, Linda cried tears of joy, saying, "He's trying so hard." When Jake got into community college, Sarah bought his textbooks. When he dropped out, she helped him land a job. When he lost it, she co-signed his apartment lease and covered the rent when he fell short. Even the house her parents lived in, Sarah's house, bought with her name on every document, was theirs to use rent-free. She never complained. Her job paid well, and she told herself she was helping. That's what good daughters did. But deep down, she knew her mother's gratitude was never real. Instead, Linda would say things like, "Jake's doing his best. Honey, it's tough out there. You're lucky to have a stable career." Those words weren't praise, they were expectations. Cloaked in kindness, Sarah had become the fixer. The one who made everything work. The one who never said no. This trip wasn't just about the foliage or the inn. It was Sarah's quiet hope that, for once, her parents would see her, not as a solution, but as their daughter. She'd imagined them at the dinner table, candles flickering, reminiscing about their honeymoon, maybe even thanking her. But as the train's rumble faded, Sarah felt a truth settle in her bones. She wasn't part of the family they wanted. The betrayal stung deeper than she expected. A week before the trip, Linda had texted, "Megan says the fall colors will be perfect for her content. Jake thinks it'd be fun if they came. Is that okay?" No mention of how they'd get there or who'd pay. Just the assumption Sarah would handle it. She'd stayed up late, scouring booking sites to secure an overpriced room for Jake and Megan near the inn, confirming the train cabin could fit 4. She'd done it all without a word. Because that's who she was, reliable, steady, invisible. Now, standing on the empty platform, Sarah didn't cry. She didn't call Jake or text her mom. She just walked to a cafe across the street, ordered another coffee she wouldn't drink, and sat by the window. watching strangers board buses to places she hadn't planned. Her phone lit up with a notification, a Facebook post from Linda. Photos of her parents, Jake and Megan, smiling on the train platform, arms linked. The caption read, "Family fall getaway. Finally making memories together." The word together hit like a punch. Sarah wasn't in the pictures, wasn't in the caption, wasn't in their story. She locked her phone and traced the scratches on the cafe table, searching for answers in the worn wood. They hadn't forgotten her, they'd chosen to leave her behind. Sarah didn't go home. Instead, she rented a car and drove north. No destination in mind, just a vague memory of a quiet town she'd passed through on a work trip, Woodstock, Vermont, nestled in the Green Mountains. She checked into a roadside inn with a crackling fireplace and a window overlooking a gravel path lined with sugar maples. For 2 days, she didn't touch her phone. She ignored Jake's half-hearted text asking if she'd mixed up the train schedule. Offering no apology, just a casual shrug, Sarah wandered through orchards, their branches heavy with the last of the season's apples, and browsed antique shops filled with things nobody needed. She bought a postcard, thought about sending it to herself, then tucked it into a book and left it there. In the silence, she didn't feel empty, she felt free. Back in her apartment, the weight of it all settled in. Sarah opened Facebook again. Linda had posted more photos, the dinner table she'd reserved, the bouquet she'd chosen, the place cards she'd written by hand. Megan sat in Sarah's seat. The caption read, "Grateful for our kids who made this anniversary so special." No mention of Sarah, just proof the weekend had happened without her. The next morning, an email from her parents' shared account landed in her inbox. Subject: trip photos. No message, just a zip file of images. Like she was a distant relative who'd missed a reunion. Sarah closed her laptop. She drove to her house, the one she'd bought 6 years ago, where her parents lived rent-free. They weren't home. She walked through the rooms, noticing faded towels she'd bought, the kitchen smelling of someone else's cooking, Megan's raincoat slung over the banister. In the dining room, where Linda had once toasted to her as our steady girl, Sarah realized something simple but seismic. They weren't guests in her life. They were takers, and she was done giving. The lease adjustment notice went out the next day. 2 copies, one left on the kitchen counter, one mailed certified. It was professional, no venom, just facts. Market rate rent starting the 1st of the month. Utilities no longer covered. Guest privileges revoked. Sarah didn't include a note. She didn't owe them one. Her mother called that afternoon, voice sharp with indignation. "Sarah, what is this? Charging us rent? We're your parents." Sarah let the silence linger before replying. "Then maybe you should have treated me like your daughter." Linda scoffed. "This is about the trip, isn't it? We didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened." Sarah heard the familiar creak of the living room floorboard over the phone. "Your father's upset," Linda added, but David hadn't called, hadn't texted. Sarah wasn't sure he even cared. "You could have just talked to us," Linda said. "I could have," Sarah replied softly. "I chose this instead. You have until the 1st. She hung up before Linda could respond. Standing at her kitchen sink, staring at the faucet, Sarah didn't feel anger or triumph, just clarity. The house wasn't hers anymore. But it wasn't theirs either. It had been a gift. Now, it was a boundary. The Vermont sky was a bruised gray when Sarah returned to her apartment. Her suitcase still packed, her heart heavy with a clarity she hadn't asked for. The sting of the train platform betrayal lingered. But it wasn't just the trip. It was the years of being the family's anchor. The one who paid the bills, fixed the messes, and swallowed her own needs to keep everyone else afloat. Sarah, now 32, had spent her life being the dependable one, first as a teenager working diner shifts to support her parents, David and Linda, then as the sister who bailed out her younger brother, Jake, time and again. But the platform in Stowe had been a breaking point. She wasn't just invisible to them, she was expendable. And that realization lit a fire she couldn't ignore. Sarah sat at her kitchen table. The lease agreement for her house, the one her parents lived in rent-free, spread out before her. She'd bought the house 6 years ago. A modest 3-bedroom in Burlington. With her own savings. It was her name on the deed. Her money covering the mortgage, taxes, and utilities. Yet her parents treated it like their own. Leaving dishes in the sink. Hanging their coats on her banister. And letting Jake's girlfriend, Megan, treat it like a backdrop for her social media posts. Sarah had never minded. Not really. She told herself it was her duty. Her role as the steady girl. But now, staring at the lease, she saw it for what it was. Not generosity, but a one-sided transaction. She drafted the lease adjustment notice with the precision of the systems analyst she was. No emotion, just facts. Starting the first of the month, David and Linda would pay market rate rent, $2,200 a month. Utilities would no longer be covered. Guest privileges, like Megan's casual stays, were revoked unless approved in writing. Sarah printed 2 copies, one for the kitchen counter. One sent certified mail. She didn't add a personal note. There was nothing left to explain. For the first time, she wasn't asking for their understanding. She was setting a boundary. The call came that afternoon. Linda's voice crackled through the phone. Sharp and accusatory. Sarah, what is this? Charging us rent? We're your parents. The word carried a weight. As if it entitled them to everything Sarah had built. She let the silence stretch. Her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee mug. Then maybe you should have treated me like your daughter, she said, her voice steady but soft. Like a blade wrapped in velvet. Linda scoffed, the sound biting through the line. This is about that trip. Isn't it? We didn't mean to hurt you. It just happened. Sarah heard the familiar creak of the living room floorboard in the background. A sound she'd once found comforting. Now it felt like an intrusion. Your father's upset, Linda added, but David's silence told a different story. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't even acknowledged the notice. You could have just talked to us, Linda said, her tone softening, trying to pull Sarah back into the familiar role of the fixer. I could have, Sarah replied. I chose this instead. You have until the 1st. She hung up before Linda could argue. Her heart pounding not with anger, but with a strange, quiet resolve. Standing at her sink, staring at the faucet's slow drip, Sarah felt the house shift in her mind. It wasn't hers anymore, not because she didn't own it, but because it had never been a home. It had been a gift she gave freely, and they'd taken it without a second thought. Now, it was a line in the sand. 3 days later, an email arrived from a local law firm Sarah didn't recognize. The subject line read, intent to dispute ownership. The letter was a carefully worded attempt to intimidate, claiming David and Linda had long-term financial contributions and shared occupancy that entitled them to partial ownership of the house. No specifics, no receipts, just vague legalese meant to scare her. Sarah forwarded it to her attorney, a no-nonsense woman named Claire who'd helped her with the house purchase years ago. Claire called within the hour. There's nothing here, she said, her voice calm but firm. No evidence, no legal standing. This is just noise. But to Sarah, it wasn't noise. It was proof. Her parents weren't sorry, they were retaliating. They didn't want her forgiveness, they wanted control. Jake showed up the next evening, standing on her apartment's doorstep. His usual cocky grin replaced by a tired, hollow look. Megan's gone, he said, scuffing his boots on the welcome mat. Said she didn't sign up for all this family drama. He didn't ask to come in. Just stood there, expecting the door to open like it always had. I don't have anywhere to go. Sarah, you know that, right? His eyes were glassy, but the apology she waited for never came. Just a quiet plea, wrapped in the same old guilt. Sarah looked at him, her little brother, the one she'd carried for years. I'm not your safety net anymore, she said, her voice gentle but unyielding. Jake stared at his shoes, then back at her, but said nothing. The door stayed closed. David never called. His silence was nothing new. Growing up, he'd always been the quiet one, sipping his coffee while Linda pushed and Jake stumbled. When Sarah broke under the weight of being the steady one, he'd retreat to the garage or the den, leaving her to pick up the pieces. She'd once thought his silence was gentle, neutral. Now she saw it for what it was. Permission. He'd let Linda's expectations pile on Sarah. Let Jake take without giving back. Let Megan take her place on the train. And now, he was letting this happen too. Letting his wife send legal threats. Letting his son beg on doorsteps. Letting Sarah carry the weight of their choices. The day she dropped off the certified notice, David was outside watering the rose bushes. He looked up as she passed. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah met his eyes. "I do," she replied, just as quietly. He turned back to the roses, as if she'd never spoken. 3 weeks later, Sarah moved into a loft across the Winooski River. Exposed brick, high windows, just enough space for her and her thoughts. She bought a second-hand couch, a brass tea kettle, and a lamp with a soft amber glow. The air smelled of dust and fresh paint. And she left the windows open to let it breathe. For the first time in years, her mornings were her own. No group chats demanding grocery money. No guilt-laced texts disguised as concern. Jake hadn't reached out since that night on her doorstep. Megan had unfollowed the family on social media. Her Instagram now a blank space where their photos used to be. Linda tried one last time. A text with no greeting. "We miss who you used to be." Sarah stared at it, then typed back, "You miss the version of me who never said no." "She's gone." There was no reply. Sarah started taking walks by the park near the train station, sometimes sitting on the same bench where she'd read Jake's text that day in Stowe. She didn't relive the hurt anymore. She just sat, letting the quiet settle over her like a warm blanket. Peace wasn't a celebration or a victory, it was the absence of their noise. Last week, she booked a train to Bar Harbor, Maine. No itinerary, no group chat, no expectations to meet, just her, a window seat, and a bookstore she'd always wanted to visit. She packed light, one bag, a notebook, a sweater that smelled faintly of cedar. At the station, she paused before boarding, remembering the Vermont morning when she'd been left behind. The sting was gone. All that remained was clarity. She wasn't their fixer, their fallback, or their foundation. She was her own beginning. On her new bathroom mirror, Sarah taped a sticky note with 5 words. "I owe myself the most." She read it every morning. Not as a mantra, but as a vow. This wasn't about cutting ties to hurt them. It was about choosing herself. If you've ever felt like the invisible one, the one who gives until there's nothing left, maybe you've had your own moment of saying enough. Share it. Your story might be the spark someone else needs to find their own line in the sand.